G'day, my name's Tucker. In the previous videos we looked at how to play through chord changes smoothly. Now we're going to put it all together and use it in a real example. Here's a 12-bar blues in the key of C, and it has three chords, the 1, the 4 and the 5. So the first thing you need to be able to do is make the sound of each of these chords by itself. Once you can do that, then you can look at being able to play smoothly through each of the chord changes. We have the 1 going to the 4, and also the 4 goes back to the 1. Now playing this chord transition forwards and backwards is not quite the same thing, but once you have the sound of each of the chords in your head and you can play it smoothly in one direction, then going back the other way shouldn't be too hard. We also have the 1 going to the 5, and the 5 goes back to the 1. And finally we have the 5 going to the 4. This song doesn't have the reverse 4 to 5 transition, but it's a good idea to practice it anyway, because even though this particular song might not have it, there are plenty of other songs out there that do. So once you can do these two things, sound out the chords and play the chord changes smoothly, you're set to go. Here's my solo. The first bar uses strong chord tones here and the weak chord tones here to make the sound of the C7 chord. When it's time to go to the F7, we have the chord tone from the C here and the chord tone from the F here, and I transition between the two smoothly by using a chromatic passing tone. This sequence of notes here only uses chord tones from the F7, so they really make the sound of this chord. When we go back to the C7, I contrast the flat 3 and the major 3 here, both of which are strong chord tones in their respective chords, and I hold the major 3 a little bit longer and growl it to help establish the sound of the C7 chord. When we go to the 4 chord again, I use the same technique as before. The B flat is a chord tone in the C7, the C is also a chord tone in the F7, and I transition between the two using a chromatic passing tone. This motif here uses the E flat and the C to make the sound of the F7 chord, and the same idea is repeated here, but instead using the major 3, which really lets the listener know that the chord has changed. The change from the C7 to the G7 starts with a simple descending melodic line using the B flat and the G to make the sound of the C7 chord. It then turns around and goes back up, but finishes on the B, which really contrasts with the B flat that we started with. The upward motion continues on until the end of the line. I use strong and weak chord tones to make the sound of the F7 chord, and again contrast the E flat and the E to highlight the transition from the F7 to the C7. More strong chord tones here and weak chord tones make the sound of the C7 before we end up in the final bar, the G7, where I use the B, which is the strong 3 chord tone, and the G note, which is the root of the G7, to really make the sound of the G7 chord. This chord is a turnaround chord. It doesn't sound quite finished, and it sets the listener up for a return to the C7 as the first bar of the next chorus. If you look at this alternate ending, I make the sound of a C chord instead, and it sounds much more finished. Chord changes are the building blocks of songs, and there's a few of them that are really common. You'll see them everywhere. So if you can nail them in 12 keys, then that'll be enough to cover 95% of what you need. Now doing all this stuff in 12 keys is a lot of work, but like most things, the more you do it, the easier it gets. You just have to sit down, do the analysis, and then go practice.